I think we need, as a nation, to value good coaching. People don't need to be yelled at and bullied and harassed and stigmatized, like, oh, you are slow or you're out of shape, do these laps or do these push-ups. Let's figure out a better way to motivate and teach good, healthy sport. If that's how an athlete and what an athlete needs to bring to be having fun and feeling like this is who they are in the sport environment, I think there's a whole generation of coaches and people watching who have to stop disrespecting and diminishing the intensity that those athletes want to bring to the field of play, for bringing their personality in that way. And that's, I think, one of the modernizations of sport. When I had them as their coach, they were these wonderful, capable, intelligent, decision-making humans. And then the parents would show up and it was like the entire thing would fall apart. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need parents to go away and parents to stop telling me what their kid can't do, because their kid does it for me all the time. I stopped coaching rowing because parents are starting to tell me what to do in a rowing environment. And I'm like, well, that's pretty funny. I think there's too many parents who bring too much of their off field of play intensity to coaches and to officials. And that's just really, really, really sad.
As an athlete, Marnie McBean made Canada proud with her relentless pursuit of excellence in the sport of rowing. And since stepping out of the boat, she has channeled that drive into a career of service, one that puts the health, activity, and safety of young Canadians at the forefront. Hey there, I'm Scott Rentoul, the host of Better Sports Parents, a podcast designed to help you, me, and everyone else out there, including this guest, become a better sports parent. We've created a resource that focuses on conversations with former pro athletes and other world-class performers across the world of sport to give you some insight and perspective into practices that can help you as you help guide your children through youth sports. No one can question Marnie McBean's resume in that regard. She's a 3-time Olympic gold medalist in rowing. She also won 3 different world championships in the sport. And she always has considered herself hardworking, but not necessarily talented as an athlete. And while many would disagree, they wouldn't disagree with how she has lived in terms of trying to positively influence those in this country. She is an author, she is a speaker, and since 2023, she has been a member of the Canadian Senate. But just like you and me, she's a parent trying to help guide her child, 10-year-old Isabel, through her youth sports journey. So while her insight and experience span the globe, the challenges she sees in youth sports are very relatable, as she encounters the exact same ones as you and I do as a parent. Please enjoy this conversation with Senator Marnie McBean. Before we get into anything, Senator, thank you very much for doing this and spending time with me here on Better Sports Parents.
Oh, my pleasure. What a great discussion. What a great discussion topic.
Well, I know it's something that you care deeply about, and I went back and forth as to where we should start, so I decided to go here. Over 20 years ago, you made an important decision that you wanted to pursue a career in a variety of capacities that impacted the health, safety, and activity of Canada's youth. Why is that so important to you?
It kind of is just sort of, I think, a little bit bred in the bone, a little bit. I realized when I was an athlete how fortunate I was and everything that I was getting from sport. And I was sort of going through my career, and I was pursuing my dreams. And at the same time, I'd come back with medals, and then I'd do a tour through a hospital, or I'd do a tour behind the scenes at Kids Help Phone, or I'd travel the world with Right to Play, seeing how sport can be used as a tool to really lure in and educate or provide healthcare for kids around the world, but also how we used it differently, structured for sport versus unstructured sport. And then, so when I retired, it all started when I retired. I went and I spoke to a group of athletes and was really trying to empower them with the knowledge that, here I was, and I just saw myself as like absolutely the kid next door, right? Like just a bit of an everybody person, and that you didn't need to be special to be winning things. And so I started by trying to empower other Canadian athletes to realize that you didn't need to be special to do special things. So that I started helping other athletes. And then I realized I also had a voice to help fundraise and advocate the wider community for teaching that sport was more than people like me chasing my dream. It was about using sport as a carrot to stay in school, to stay healthy, to stay out of trouble, to make sure I understood how my neighborhood was working.
I think parents out there who are watching or listening, or maybe coaches who are watching or listening, all have ideas about what sport can do and the vehicle it can be for some of those things that you mentioned. Why do you think it is such an important vehicle for things like health long term?
Sport is kind of like it's the fun thing that brings you in. You don't know you're getting all the other things, right? Like if you start with kids, kids are just running and playing and being happy. And as they're running and playing and being happy, they're making their body healthier. And as they're running and playing, well, and making themselves happy, they're happy and they're not bored. And when you're bored, being bored and doing less, and I can even say nothing. And I don't think reading a book is doing nothing, by the way. And I don't think that is being bored. But when you're bored, your mind goes to kind of lazy stuff, and lazy stuff is shortcuts, and it's eating badly, because we all do this, adults do this, we graze when we're bored, and I'm driven less to snack, when I'm busy. Anything, when my mind's busy, when my body's busy, and so I think being active, creates social environments where we're doing good things and getting positive results out of it. If I observe my daughter, when she is involved in sport, it is fulfilling, I think, the parent's primary goal, which is to build your kid's confidence. Right. And so when Izzy is in sport, she is building friends. She is making her body feel good. Right. And you can call that, adults call that healthy, but, kids just say they feel good. Right. So she's not snacking because she's bored and I'm filling time. She's not watching endless, and my kid watches screen time. I'm not gonna say she doesn't have screen time, but she's not stuck in endless screen time that just sucks her energy out. If she's tired, if I'm tired and I go out and I do anything, like even go for a walk, I have more energy after, and she's the same. So I kind of just think when we help people, and kids be active, it just sends us down all the right paths for all the good things. Like it's easier to eat a carrot and cucumber, versus chips when you're busy, because you're just busy, and chips and salt are just taste so good. But there's a time for those things, but it's easier to make better choices when I'm busy and when Izzy's busy and when we're all busy.
For you, just like for me, there was a long time between when I was in the youth sports environment and then when my children entered the youth sports environment. So you mentioned your daughter, Izzy. What does the youth sports environment look like for her compared to the one that you grew up in?
Oh, so structured. The thing that kids now don't get as much of, and I remember learning this with when I was doing work with Right to Play. I would just say North American kids, with urban kids particularly, all play is structured, right? It's like a program of hockey, it's a program of soccer, of I don't know, like dance, gymnastics. It's all programs instead of just, I was like, it's the classic trope, right? Kicked out of the house until, don't come home till the street lights are on, kind of thing. But it's just a different world. The density of the urban environments we live in is so different right now. So I would love for Izzy and her friends to have more unstructured play. And that's only going to come at like a recess and lunchtime. And I love trying to create these environments where there's unstructured play. But Izzy has a lot of structured programs now, and unfortunately, I don't think schools provide as much. Like they do a little bit of sports, but it's not the same sport prep, right? If they play basketball, and I don't want to malign all phys ed teachers, but they just can't teach it the same way. They can't teach the same skills in school, and certainly not all. Some are excellent. So if you want your kid to do a sport, you've got to find a out of school program for them, which is a big problem, right? That's a privilege to be able to, the play report came out and showed that the number one way that kids get to after school programs is to be driven in a car. And that's a privilege, right? To be able to have the time and the car to drive my kid to programs after school, to find a carpool, all these things. So, Scott, you're going to find I have really long answers. But yeah, so the answer there is the difference is structured versus unstructured play.
I agree with you, and there's so many different ways we can go with that. But what you referenced there with the state of play that Jumpstart produced, I agree with wholeheartedly that we are seeing this privileged environment for children in this structured arena that we have created for them around youth sport. And it's part of the reason that we see that drop off at 13 years old, and one that I certainly am not in favor of. And I imagine you're the same way because I see all those same benefits that you referenced earlier through sport. I don't know if you have an easy solution as to how we fix it, but I know that now you're in a position where you can have some of those discussions. Are you finding like minded people in this country who also want to see change? Not, hey, we have to make it exactly the way it used to be, but we can get to a better environment for youth sports.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. There are, like, I would say almost say tens of thousands of people who are like-minded in the country about what we need to do, but how do we do it? Like, I had, a really interesting conversation, and maybe even someone I can introduce you to for a future show, on the value of multi-sport participation for kids. Because one of the other things we're seeing with kids now, the difference now is how kids are specializing at such a crazy young age. Like Izzy does hockey 3 times a week, and then skiing 3 times a week, and in season has soccer 3 times a week. And there's many kids who have those sports 3 to 5 times a week. At age 7, 8, 9. That's crazy, and it doesn't leave a lot of room for experimenting with other sports. In the Senate, for sure, even in February and March of this year, with a couple of my colleagues, Senator Chantal Petitclerc and Senator Marty Deacon were kind of hosting an inquiry, which is where we're just asking senators to speak on their experience of sport and activity and how it affects the even just the Canadian experience, right? Whether you participated, whether you are a witness. Like, I used to have people come up to me when I came back from the Olympics, and what blew me away was people would often come and say thank you. They would be not congratulating me for doing well at the Olympics, but thanking me for doing well at the Olympics because how it made them feel proud to be a Canadian. Or, for people who had even just recently immigrated and become Canadians, it's the first time that they get to feel like they're cheering and supporting their new country. That was a really unique experience. But at the Senate, we're operating at the federal level, and so we have actually just a very small window of opportunity to impact the federal sport landscape because sport, like health and education, is administered provincially across the country. So I think people in regional areas can have a better and bigger impact than they know. But the conversation, like I was saying, on multi-sport was an interesting one because, it was being brought to me on how can we move the conversation of the value of multi-sport participation along. And to me, it's a no-brainer, right? Of course, like, there is so much evidence that says that if you are participating in multiple sports and not streamlining too soon, that there is a benefit. Like, if you do multiple sports, you will be a better athlete when you become into, like, your maturity. Like, if you look at someone like Steve Nash, the basketball player, he's an extraordinary soccer player, was maybe a soccer player first, maybe strangely aging out as an example. But who do we promote that with, right? Is it in the I'm in the Toronto area? Is it the GTHL, one of Canada's largest hockey programs? Is it in their best interest to be promoting multi-sport? Not really, but yes, it should be. Is it the schools promoting multi-sport? Well, they would probably say they do. Schools are going to be teaching basketball and volleyball and soccer and some indoor sports as well, baseball. They don't do gymnastics as much. anymore because tumbling is increasingly problematic if it's not taught properly. It's parents. It's right here. It's parents need to know the value of multi-sport in producing an athlete. Like you say, like we want to stop athletes from dropping out of sport. If they only have one sport, then that's a problem. One of the best pieces of advice I was given as a parent when Izzy was quite young, like even 3 and 4 years old, was to diversify my child's friend base. Because friends are gonna have little tiffs and fights, and, if you only have your school friends, then if something goes wrong in that environment, then that's crushing. But if you have your school friends and your soccer friends and your skiing friends or your hockey friends, then you can always kind of just go from group to group. Your tumbling friends, it's like it can be anything. But if you've diversified your friend base, then you have options. And this is the same thing with sport, right? So if things suddenly aren't going well with Izzy and hockey, and she decides that hockey's not her thing, she still has soccer to go to. She's not falling into this void of nothing. So I think that, am I finding voices out there? Yes, there's so many voices and so many people who believe in the value of sport, but it's trying to figure out where and who we're talking to that isn't just the choir, and that someone can be making informed decisions going forward.
Well, and I do want to get to that action piece because even discussions like this, I do believe they're positive. I do believe they're a starting point, but those words have to be turned into actions. But the conundrum you lay out is one that I think a lot of parents find themselves in is that they know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. And yet your child gets into a league, into a sport, and it feels as though there's this mandate to be there 3, 4, 5 times a week and a pressure that comes with it that if you're not, your child's either going to fall behind or not be allowed to participate. And parents react out of fear and they try to do the best thing for their child, but they're on this treadmill that they don't know how to get off. I want to talk about how you became an Olympic rower because I believe your opinion is based in your experience as well. I get the sense that your childhood had a lot of multi sport. When did rowing start for you, and how did multi sport contribute to it?
So my parents weren't particularly athletic. Like I don't think I ever saw either of my parents on a bike. Like I saw my mom sort of run like a little bit, but I never saw my mom run. But my mom and my dad, but my mom was particular like moms of the time doing all the parenting. She just was trying to keep me busy, and she just would find things. We had this like rule in the family, like I could enroll in anything, but I had to sort of see it through. Some things she chose for me, but I was enrolled in swimming and gymnastics. And then, she found T-ball, and I did a lot of T-ball and then softball kind of thing. And my mom, even she figured it out. She didn't, like I said, she figured out how to play baseball and was like a T-ball and then a softball coach. And she just kind of figured it out. And she probably wasn't the best with strategy, but actually I was ended up being a pretty good player. But I think what my mom did was teach me to try things. And, like I said, the schools were better set up. So, out of school, I did pretty much those. I think those were the only program. Like I also signed up for guitar. Kinda I did chess club. I signed up for my there's the trivia question. My first trophies were in chess, by the way. Um, but that was where like it just started for me. It was like trying things and encouraging me to be active and outside and go do something kind of thing. I was never allowed to sit at home and not do anything. I had a paper route that took up a lot of time after school. And if I wanted to watch TV, I had to do my paper route quickly. So I remember running a lot to do and haul the papers around. But sort of thinking about the amount of sport that Izzy does, and she's in grade 5 now, I'm like, well, I don't think I ever had any extramural. Like my school never played any other school with like volleyball or basketball, and I don't even think we really played as a team until I went to high school. Like that seems kind of weird. I'm like, did I? And so not till grade 9, but then in high school, I did everything, right? I was on every intramural and extramural team I could find in high school. Always made a team, was always competitive, but history would show that I'm maybe not the most agile. I don't have the best hand-eye coordination. I don't see chaos well, like for sports like basketball or soccer. Like I'm a better defender than I am at seeing an offensive play. But my mom taught me to try things. And so then eventually I saw rowing in a movie. It was Oxford Blues, Rob Lowe rolling around in a pair of jeans. I saw it in a movie, and it was in a chocolate bar commercial. It was actually a coffee crisp ad. And I was just curious about this sport. And since my mom had taught me to try, I came home and I said, "Mom, how do you learn to row?" And my mom was like, "I haven't a clue. Like, who knows anything about rowing? It's a bit of it remains a niche sport." But we looked it up, and we looked up the rowing club, and there was a learn to row program, and so I tried that. That's just really where it started, and I just kind of kept pursuing it, and I remember at that time, I was doing swimming, so I think I was doing my bronze cross or something like that. So I had swimming between 8 and 10 in the morning, and then I would ride my bike down to the Argonaut Club, and I took rowing between 11 and 1. And I only say that because you cannot do anything worse for your hands than be in a pool for 2 hours, make your hands really soft, and then go rowing. But I loved it anyways, and there was just something from the first moment. All the things that I didn't have for field sports, like, I loved running around, I loved sweating, I loved pushing myself, but like I said, I wasn't gifted. For all the things that I didn't have for field sports, I had for rowing. And it really made me believe, and I take out the notion that I think everybody is excellent at something, right? There is a sport or an activity out there that fits everybody. I think that's what the RBC Olympians program tries to do. Like, it takes, if you can sign up for that, and they put you through sort of a battery test, a physical test and measurements, and they say, well, you might like soccer, but they took someone like Kelsey Mitchell who was trying to play soccer, and they said, maybe you try cycling, and she's an Olympic champion in that sport. I found rowing. So I think everybody's excellent at something, and if you're lucky, you find it. So again, as a parent, I think our job is to teach our kid, to encourage our kids to feel confident and to try things, to try new things, to try things on. And because I'm in a train of thought, we sort of spoke about it, how kids are getting sort of streamlined. For the last few Olympics, I think Canada has done well at games, but if we look at the population of Team Canada that's winning medals, it's really skewed highly to the women have been winning lots of the medals. And so I often get asked, what's going on with the men? Like, why do Canadian men not win as many? Because if we have a team of 50-50%, 50% women, 50% men, but like 70% of the medals are coming or higher are coming from our women's team. What's the deal there? I don't think anything's going wrong with male athletes in Canada, but I think so many Canadian families put so many boys into hockey, and more girls are getting into hockey, I know, but really it's so many boys going into hockey. And those boys are doing hockey 3 to 5 times a week. You don't have time to explore other sports, right? So I think there are a lot of great Canadian athletes, great boy athletes who are good hockey players because they're great athletes. But maybe they would be great water polo players or great rowers or wrestlers, great trampoline athletes, great moguls athletes. They're not finding the sports that they're exceptional at because they're being good hockey players.
Well, and this goes back to something you said earlier about multi-sport, and when you said, "Hey, it's not in the best interest of the GTHL to have multi-sport," and yet it is. I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's my answer when parents ask me or colleagues ask me about it, and I say, "Well, you know what hockey needs, or you know what rowing needs, or you know what basketball needs? They need better athletes." And we know from the data that you referenced earlier what builds better athletes, and it is multi-sport, and it is diversity of activity and different roles in different sports. You said prior to getting into rowing, which we know you excelled at the highest level possible, you were playing all of these sports where it may not have been your best sport. What kept you in them, even though you didn't deal with some of that chaos well that you referenced earlier?
That's actually a really good question. I love running around. Like I found it really fun. Just and I think maybe I was a great athlete. I was good at these sports, so I would maybe make the starting line in basketball, but I wouldn't be the start star. Or I might make the starting six for volleyball, but I certainly was I I had a lot to learn. But I think I loved being with my friends. It's also sport should be social. We work really hard with Izzy to in all of her sports and all of her teams to really make sure that the relationship goes beyond the field of play with the team. Even when I was like a rower and people would ask me, where does motivation come to work that hard? I was rowing 3 times a day, 6 days a week, 11 months a year kind of thing, and people are like, "Oh, how do you stay motivated for that?" Right? Because everyone thinks about their own that was my job, and everyone was like, "It's so hard to stay motivated for our jobs, all the time." They're like and I was like, "Oh my gosh." For sure, there was times of the year where I hated rowing, right? I just absolutely did not look forward to rowing, but I like my team, right? I wanted to be there for my team. And so the answer to where does motivation come from? It's not from the same place all the time, right? If you think you're going to be motivated to win every day, that's going to be a problem. Because some days you're going to be motivated to learn. Like some days I'm motivated to learn. Some days I'm motivated to win. Some days I'm motivated to not lose, which is so different than not winning. I'm like, I just don't want to lose today, so I go out, I do it. Some days I'm motivated, because of just the aesthetics of my sport, like, it's really pretty. And some days I'm motivated because I don't want people to think I'm a quitter, which is a really funny thing to be motivated by it, but I would use that, right? If the only reason I went to rowing was because I didn't want people to see that I was, being lazy or quitting on that day, I would use that. And I think kids are no different, right? Some days they're gonna go to their sport because they like it. Some days they're gonna go because, the parents telling them to go to it. And some days they're gonna go, because they wanna hang out and gossip with their friends, and maybe on those days they're gonna be a little silly. But if that's what got them there that day, and the next day they're going to be focused and learning, that's amazing. The data of learning shows that even when performance is going down because of fatigue, learning is still going up. Sometimes you just gotta get there, and it doesn't matter what takes you there. So I think with the motivation for what had me doing them is it was mostly fun, right? And I love competing. I loved any chance I had to compete, but I also liked learning and improving my skills and being around my friends.
Well, it's interesting that you listed in that order because that state of play by Jumpstart that you referenced a little earlier, as they conduct that and as you look at kids and why they participate and the answers they give, not the ones adults assume they have, those are the reasons they list. They want to have fun. They want to be with their friends. Yes, they want to improve their skills and yes, they want to win, but those come further down the list. When you look at the youth sports environment today, the one that you see your daughter in, do you see fun as the main purpose when she's participating? Not for her, but for the drivers within those organizations or the teams or sports she's a part of.
Yeah, I'm really lucky, and then Scott, I'm gonna also say that, we have invested in a league that chooses the importance of multi-sport. So, the hockey league that our daughter is in is a multi-sport league. So, we don't play league games, we play tournament games, which means we get more practice. And I would say, it's not like they're out playing games, they're still trying hard, but it allows for, like, she is in a league that is really hard to find in Canada where she's playing hockey and gets to ski on weekends, and that's really important for us. And our soccer league is adjusted a little differently so that the kids can also do different summer programs. We are choosing a little less intensity on the performance in the moment for trying to make sure that our kids stay in sport for a longer period of time. The other thing I would say about sport now, and particularly what is different for sport for young girls is in all these things in keeping it fun, we have to also realize that it doesn't need to live in the same box of like the militant structure that sport used to live in the 70s and 80s, where, everyone wore the same shorts, the same high socks, the same white shirt. There is a lot to be said for letting all kids come with their own personality. And, you might see this, I'll start over in a sport like hockey or soccer. Now it's like, the mullet hair or the lettuce. We understand how there is some personality that comes out with let's say, uh, stereotypically male hair, and we're like, "Oh, yeah, that's just them and their personality and who they are." But so with girls in sport, some of them, their hair and how it's braided, colored, nails, makeup, eyeliner, mascara, like personally, I don't see those as my part of my sport journey, but if that's how an athlete and what an athlete needs to bring to be having fun and feeling like this is who they are in the sport environment, I think there's a whole generation of coaches and people watching who have to stop disrespecting and diminishing the intensity that those athletes want to bring to the field of play for bringing their personality in that way. And that's, I think, one of the modernizations of sport and how we're going to keep young girls from dropping out is allowing them to bring who they are and stop saying, well, you can't wear your hair, or you can't, wear your nails, or you can't do your eyes in the way that you want to do your eyes if you want to be an athlete. Because, like, how do those things really interrupt being an athlete? But honestly, I do think sometimes nails can get in the way of. I was actually talking to a young hockey player about how she puts her hands into her gloves with her nails, and she's like, "Well, when they do tend to come off." But like, let kids learn that journey versus us trying to stigmatize them for bringing a sense of their own personal style into these environments.
Well, I'm smiling because this resonates with me. I have a couple of daughters, and my oldest daughter has been involved in school sports the past couple of years. And one of the things that her and her teammates have really enjoyed, whether it's in volleyball season or basketball season, is deciding what hairstyle they're all going to try to wear the next day, or
Yeah,
maybe painting their nails a certain color for the game because they want to do that together. And I think it's a really important point you make, because we can't assume what is fun about the sport for the children.
yeah.
We have to let them show us what is fun and allow them, within the context of, yes, playing a game of volleyball or playing a game of basketball, express themselves and show us the reasons that they want to be in it. It sounds like you found some exceptional leagues for your child to participate in that way, and whether it's through the diversity of sport, but also that self-expression as well. How do we propagate that attitude across this country when leagues and sports do seem to be so increasingly focused on themselves and almost feel like they want to live in silos?
Well, that's the other, I'm gonna use the word problem with sport right now. It's being heavily monetized, right? So these sports are no longer sort of volunteer parents coming together and trying to figure out what's the in the best interest for kids. That they're not run by municipalities. They're careers for individuals who start them, right? Like, they always start off with best intentions, and then they grow, and suddenly you have salaries and mortgages, and you have sort of, it becomes a bit of an economy that somebody's trying to maintain. We have to recognize that most of the leagues are in it to make the leagues profitable, and that the kids and their attendance and the numbers are being monetized, which sometimes ends up diminishing the quality of coaching. And we're sort of sold that the why we need to be there and support these leagues. So it takes a little bit of the parents demanding different opportunities and speaking up and making choices. But I get that it's hard when you think it's really important for your kid to put another A on. in it, like, whether they're playing A or double A, versus rep and select and whatever, however the hockey league in your region works. But it seems that everyone is it's hard to be good with what you got. We all sort of somehow end up comparing to the Joneses and wanting the best for our kid, but sometimes the best for our kid is for them to be in a league down where they can have, like, maybe even a 50-50 season, but they're winning some and losing some and playing great sport versus being on a team where they're playing not at all. And, you just because I want everyone to be getting some field time, some game time, and again, like, I think the goal is building people's confidence, and confidence comes from, having fun and feeling like you're giving as good as you get, like, giving to your team as much as you get from your team, like, those are the best teams. It is a bit of a trick for us to collectively change, like, where does change start from? And is it sustainable, right? When just pressing easy button when there's somebody who's just invested a little bit to bring in a better coach, right? Who doesn't want that for their kid, right? So then all of a sudden you get stuck trying to be there with a better coach, the better opportunity. Have to do this for my kid. And we're exactly the same with our, hopefully with our education. It'd be awesome if people were chasing down education, in the same way that we chase down sport, like, the best opportunities for our kids in sport.
You mentioned confidence, and that's been a through line through this conversation. It's very clear that that's one of the things that you want Isabel to get out of sport, and it certainly has helped you. I think part of this discussion is defining what success is through sport or what winning is through sport, and many people will view it as what you did, winning an Olympic medal or playing a professional sport. For you, in your family and with your value system, what is winning through sport ultimately for your daughter?
We don't talk about, my rowing very much. Dina and I were both loved sport, right? So Izzy doesn't see me rowing and she doesn't see Dina doing her sport so much, but she sees us being active. So the win and in sport for us is really about just trying hard, trying doing your best and trying hard. And we are, we've said many times to Izzy, we're okay with her. And, I'm kind of proud to say she's not bad at sport. So, but we're like, we're fine if she's terrible at sport, but if she's trying her hardest, if we see her out on any field of play, not trying, not paying attention, she'll get in trouble that day. But if she's out there not doing well, that's fine. Like she's allowed to be not good at things. It's her journey to figure out where she's gonna come out as an athlete. But the thing is that we find things that she does enjoy doing. Like, that's increasingly she gets to make more choices about what she does. She has to be busy, but she gets to choose the programs that she's continuing in now. But she just has to be participating and trying. So that's the success, is that she respects her coaches and that she tries her best. And I'll say the one thing I do bring lessons. I don't bring the target of winning from my own career. I bring the lessons I've learned from it. And that is that bringing your best on any given day isn't the same on every day. Some days are just bad, like you're tired, you're sick, you're injured. It's just there's a lot going on. And what you bring on those days, the performance level you bring on those days might be pretty low, but it's the best that you have to bring on a bad day. And then there's good days and there's great days. And on great days, gosh, bringing in like a high level of performance is so easy because it's just like, I don't know, just it's kind of like the moon and the stars. They've all lined up. But the goal is to bring the best that you've got on any given day.
You've gotten this global perspective. You mentioned working with Right to Play, and because of your journey post career in rowing, you've been able to see so many different cultures and so many different sporting environments as well. And as you mentioned earlier, it's taught you a lot about what sport is. What can we as a country and in our own communities learn from what you've seen and these experiences around the world that we can incorporate into our youth sporting environments to help parents out there with their own children?
So many different things, but I think one of the things is maybe some patience. You know, we don't need to be rushing our kids to be professional sport players. It's even before age 15, right? Like, like their bodies and their minds are still growing, and so there's, like, just a lot of patience involved in it, and letting the child reveal who they are and what they want, versus the imposed perspective of the, adult parent. I do try to remember that, and I try to remember also the lessons that I learned, 'cause I spent a lot of time with kids, and around kids and coaching before I had my own, and I know I what I was learning that there was, I think I remember saying that I thought, particularly probably for, high school kids, maybe now even elementary kids, so maybe 10 to 17-year-olds, that most parents tend to see their kids as, like, 1 or 2 years younger. Their capability and their maturity level is 1 or 2 years younger than they are because, our kids like to be completely disabled around us, and we like to see them as, we still see them as, people who we used to literally wipe their bum. And, so when I had them as their coach, they were these wonderful, capable, intelligent, decision-making humans, and then the parents would show up, and it was like the entire thing would fall apart. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I need parents to go away and parents to stop telling me what their kid can't do because their kid does it for me all the time." And so there's that other thing of we're around our kids too much. Like, I don't know if you ever go away for a weekend or a week without your kid. It's so, rare, but you're like, "Oh my gosh, my kid grew up so much when I was away." They're growing up constantly. And so to us, empower our kids to be, and I'm terrible at this. We're not great at this in my own house. I just know it to be true. When we remember to empower our kids and let them make decisions, every time we do that, they will grow because they will realize, again, this is how they get the confidence for them to be the decision maker and understand what they want. That's an incredible thing. One of the things I love about rowing, and when I see young kids rowing, almost no adult, no parent chooses rowing for their kid because, the school program will say, "Oh yeah, well, you're gonna have to be at the rowing club at, like, 5 in the morning. We'll be done at 7 AM. Your kid will be back at school by 7:30, 7:45." And every parent goes, "Oh my god, my kid will never do that." So, the thing about rowing that's different from, hockey and soccer and swimming, gymnastics, is it's the sport that the kid chose. Right? I remember going to the Olympics and talking with I remember choosing rowing, and it makes it a unique sport for me, right? And I would be talking to someone like Mark Tewksbury, who was a swimmer, and he does not remember choosing swimming. He just always swam. And so when you get to a point where you're letting your kid make choices about what they wanna do, oh, you gotta listen to that because that is such a powerful thing. It's such a great motivator.
Well, and when you see rowers out on the water, their parents physically can't be right beside them
Oh,
or
it's amazing.
15 feet away. And
Yeah.
it's something that other athletes who have come on this podcast have commented on. And yet, you know this because your child is in a sporting environment right now. Parents are around more than ever before. And you just touched
Yeah.
on it. But I'd love to know your opinion after you know your child is in a safe environment. We all have to ensure that for our children. No one would argue otherwise. But once you know they're in a safe environment, do you believe parents should be at practice? Or do you believe they should drop kids off and let them do their own thing?
I have a yes answer to that. Like, if you ask anyone around us, I often stay, but not because I'm observing practice. It's usually it's social for me. I'm talking to the other parents, and we're talking about everything but. And sometimes Izzy will say, "Did you see this?" Or "I looked up and you weren't watching," and I'm like, "No, I wasn't watching. I was talking with so and so's, dad or mom." I say because it's inconvenient for me to drive there, drive home, drive there. If I have errands to do that I can do in the 60 or 90 minutes or, not often 2 hours of practice. If I had errands that I can do or I need to do, I'll do that. That's great. But often I sit there, especially with soccer. It's nice outside. I'm just going to sit there with hockey. I didn't grow up playing hockey, so I think if you are going to be there and observe your kid having fun, I don't need to have many, many or any comments about Isabel's performance at practice. I don't see a problem with that. But if you're there because you want to be backseat coaching kind of thing, armchair coaching from the side, then that's maybe not the right environment. I do think some kids really enjoy their parents not being there. Like I really try not to watch Izzy and when she was younger, like I said, we just needed to she tries hard all the time now. Like I don't need to be there to be making sure she's listening to the coach or anything like that. The coaches are professional and they can, be making sure she's listening. And if she's not listening, they have their own ways of letting her know that. And usually it's just by going up and telling her to pay attention, quite honestly. But I know that I stopped coaching rowing because parents are starting to tell me what to do in a rowing environment, and I'm like, "Well, that's pretty funny." I think there's too many parents who bring too much of their off field of play intensity to coaches and to officials, and that's just really, really, really sad. It's hard, like, when I'm an athlete, I know where my energy goes, and when I was coaching was harder because I have all of the intensity, but I have none of the outlet. But at least you're coaching. And so as a parent, I can see it being really, really challenging if you've got all this outlet and you need to put your energy, just have fun. The whole goal is like having fun at the Olympics. Maybe I'm rambling again, but when we were prepping, maybe I'll go here. When I was prepping athletes for the Olympics, one of the biggest distractions for athletes preparing and being at an Olympic Games is friends and family. And the biggest tool we could give to friends and family when they were coming to watch their athlete at the Olympics, there's enough pressure for the investment for a family to come. Like, there's families who put mortgages on their home so that they could afford to travel to and have accommodation and buy tickets at an Olympics. And and sometimes those family members are very used to being present at the field of play, which at the Olympics they can't be. And the best feedback I've gotten from parents is when I've actually gone up to them and very purposefully told them, "You need to be having a great vacation, and you need to be telling your athlete that you're there for more than them, and you are there to watch them have fun." I know of one particular athlete, one parent who came up to me when we were Canada Olympic House, and he was watching his daughter with her gold medal, and he was like, that was one of the best pieces of advice their family got. So parents need to be going to sport to watch their kids have fun. No coach is perfect. My coach, even at the Olympics, wasn't perfect, but he's my coach and he cared about me and he wanted me to be the best. And we need to trust that those coaches have the best interest of the team in mind, and that doesn't always mean each individual gets what they want, but the best interest of the team, and that's on the coaches too to make sure they're being transparent. It's really helpful for parents. But that was a long answer to should I be or not be around for practices and games, but I do think it's a bit of a yes answer, and it depends on there's a requirement for the parent to realize what their role is in that space is just to observe play.
Well, and I can hear coaches out there nodding along as you say, "Well, I left coaching rowing because of overbearing parents, quite frankly." And this is one of the divides I see right now in youth sports is that we have not enough communication between coaches and parents, and not enough healthy communication. And coaches going, "Well, my biggest problem is the parents," and parents going away in their little groups and going, "Well, the coach doesn't know this, and if they did, they'd play my kid here and power play one," or whatever it happens to be. You've been in those coaching environments. What does a healthy relationship between coach and parent look like to you?
Well, for sure, rowing makes it easier because parents don't know anything about rowing. Like mostly the pressure I was getting was kind of on a selection. In rowing, we have to make cuts because it's not like a basketball team or a hockey team where you can easily rotate people in. It's dark and it's cold and it's you can't easily rotate an athlete in from the coach boat into the boat. And so that was the biggest thing was they didn't want us to make any cuts, which also disrespects the work that people do and the hard work that people were doing to make the crew. So that was rowing's way easier than most sports because no one's going to tell me that the kid that I put in 6 seat should have been in 4 seat or something like that, right? Or, I think I have that authority. I think a sport like hockey and then, increasingly soccer, where everybody thinks they know who should be the starting line and what the line changes should be. The amount of commentary for our Olympic team and for our men's and our women's team is just like mind numbing on how many Canadians think they could do a better job than the professionals who are out there. And I think the thing to recognize is that coaching is art. It is not a science. It's not math or accounting where all the numbers line up and you can get it done perfectly. And it's got to be done in the moment. And so I think the best relationship is one of understanding the abilities and honestly, everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and if you're gonna focus on all of your coach's weaknesses and not figure out what their strengths are, then you have a real problem. The conversation that you have should be one of trust. I had a parent actually talk to me the other day where the coach wanted to restrict a return to play. An athlete was injured, a child was injured, and the coach wanted to extend a recovery period. And the parent was like, "Well, I have a doctor's note that the child's okay." And I was like, "Well, I asked the parent, like, "Do you trust that the coach will push your child to get better? Like, when everything's going well, do you trust that this coach is teaching your child to perform better and get better?" And then the parent was like, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, then can you trust that the coach sees something that is suggesting to the coach that the kid needs a little more time for return to play?" So then I was like, "Okay." So the parent was like, "Right." So I'm like, "Well, talk with the coach about what return to sport is gonna look like and ask the coach what modifications, can be made to training in the interim." And so on the other side, the coach and I know it's exhausting, there's a lot like, coaching is so hard. Coaching is more than like, if your hockey practice is 1 hour, it's more than that 1 hour, right? So that it's all the prep that goes into that and thinking about it. So, sometimes going and asking a coach to do more is they're usually not paid or not well paid, but working with the coach and the coach working with the parent about communication, about why, you know, maybe not why a specific decision is made, because again, that's sometimes art, but sort of a global understanding on what the framework for why decisions are being made, that can be really helpful in that relationship. It can't just be the parent sitting back and being patient all the time. That's going to happen a lot better if the coach has the ability to communicate what their vision is, what they're thinking about, how decisions are being made. And so, if decisions are made consistently and transparently, it usually allows people to be a little bit more patient.
I want to tie a couple of things together that you've said throughout the course of this conversation. One, you just touched on, hey, at some point we have to make cuts because we can't rotate people in and out of the boat. So we do have to make cuts. And then you said earlier that when you look at the studies from State of Play through Jumpstart, that one of the things you hear from children who drop out of sports is that they feel like they're not good enough to participate. But as you said earlier, and I am fundamentally of this belief as well, everybody is excellent at something and everybody can play. I believe that for the course of their life, they can. They don't have to go to the Olympics. They don't have to be a professional, but that doesn't mean they can't play and get fun and enjoyment out of sport. So, one of the issues I see right now in sport in this country is that when we get to the more competitive levels, as children get older, I see a lack of recreational pathways for those who don't get into that first boat or who do not make the high school basketball team. We have high performance, and then we have this massive gap for our teenagers. Do you see the same issue? And how do we fix it? I guess is the $1,000,000 or $1,000,000,000 question.
And it'd be great if school programs were, or continue to be super stronger, right? So when you get into high school, there'll be, and honestly, that was all I had was high school volleyball, high school basketball, high school soccer, track and field, cross country. Like I think I did all five of those things, and they just that worked for me. And those progressed. And then when I went to university, I could have done intramural on all of those things. It certainly wasn't my pathway. Actually, for a lot of people, actually, high school basketball might have been a pathway to like varsity basketball at the time. Now, I think you would definitely need to have program basketball backing that up. But yeah, it's there are a lot of sports like and I think particularly hockey, right? So if you fall out of hockey, it's hard to find recreational hockey or school hockey that's going to be high enough. It's you need more municipal hockey and it is still an investment. But the thing is, it would be nice if is a probably better way of saying it, if it didn't feel like such a fail to not make a team, right? Like, so people are trying to, like I said earlier, they're so desperate to get be playing double A hockey that when they don't make the double A hockey, they feel like single A or even maybe rep or select hockey is the place that they should be, but maybe their friends aren't there, or it's somehow stigmatized, which is such a shame because you just want to be playing hockey, and maybe a player just needs to go there until they hit their growth spurt or something like that, and talent and strength line up because there are these jumps right where you have skill and then size and then skill and then size, and if you're out of sync on those things, so maybe you just have to go into a different place, and then all of a sudden your skill size are going to line up a little bit better. It would be great that it wasn't stigmatized so much, and I think that also is gonna be coming and stemming from the family conversation of, like, "Hey, let's just go there's a couple of teams we're gonna try out for, right? We're not just gonna try out for this one team. There's a couple of teams we're gonna try out for, and, maybe these aren't your friends today, but they'll be your friends, like, after, like, 3 weeks and one hockey tournament," to stick with sort of that. It could be soccer, it could be anything. In this whole conversation too, we've mostly talked about team sports, and I want to say that Rosie McLennan is our two-time Olympic champion in trampoline, and I heard her speak once, and she was so grateful for her school to still be providing an opportunity to try individual sports, right? So there's a lot of things where the reason why people get out of sports is because team sports isn't their thing. So I think the other thing to make sure of is that if your kid's not fitting in or doesn't seem to be liking, when we're talking about diversifying sports, it could be that it's racket sports like squash or tennis. It could be taekwondo. I had a friend once, and she was like her daughter wasn't really connecting with soccer or swimming, but she really wanted her to do something, and her daughter kinda liked gymnastics, and it was, just and I remember at the time I recommended synchronized, which is now artistic swimming, and her daughter loved it, and artistic swimming is an individual task performed in a team, right? It's kind of like band, right? Where you play an instrument, no one helps you play your clarinet, no one helps you play your piano, but when you perform in a concert, there's something magical about it, and there's some sports that are very much like that. So artistic swimming, sometimes really checks the boxes for kids. So that's the other thing, like when we were saying earlier, like find the thing that's right for your kid. Team sports are not the fit for a lot of people. And, Rosie was pointing out how important it is to remember to try individual sports also.
That's a great point, and I think we see that as adults as well because what do a lot of adults end up falling into or trying to join? It's a 5K run or maybe
Yeah.
perhaps a half marathon or a marathon, and that's an individual pursuit done as a community, and the power of that for a lot of people is transformative in their lives. We're at somewhat of a crossroads in this country right now, as you know, because there's been the Commission on the Future of Sport in Canada. And I know you've been involved in some of those discussions and having some of those conversations. And I know we won't have an easy answer to this right now, but we have some big decisions to make as a country. Because as you said earlier, we have this specialization issue, and that ends up eroding your participation base, which ultimately is going to erode your high performance and elite level athletes who go to the Olympics if you erode everything underneath that. Not an easy question to ask, but I will ask it anyway. What action or actions do you believe as a country we should take today so that we can improve the youth sports environment moving forward in this country?
So you're asking a federal question about something that's managed provincially. So that is a challenge. I'd like to see, it could be federal and provincial tax incentives for multi-sport participation. You get, bumps up for doing different sports. I think, it'll be interesting to see what direction the Secretary of Sport, Olympic champion Adam Van Koeverden takes, and whether or not they're going to listen to that future sport report and create a new sport entity that replaces or advances Sport Canada. Because Sport Canada is actually a terrible name for that. Because it should be called High Performance Sport Canada, because Sport Canada does not manage sport for all. Sometimes I wonder if sport should move from heritage, where it exists almost as a branding exercise to make sure that we're really all proud to have the Maple Leaf as a high performance and a successful team. Or maybe sport stays, and this would be complicated, but sport stays in heritage, but activity moves to health, and then we could sort of start seeing and investing in the long term advantages of sport. I think we need as a nation to value good coaching. And if we can figure out how to incentivize good, healthy coaching in a modern way, in a less military kind of, to use loose language, abusive way, like people don't need to be yelled at and bullied and harassed and stigmatized, like, oh, you were slow or you're out of shape, do these laps or do these push-ups. Let's figure out a better way to motivate and teach good, healthy sport. I think if we get the teachers, we'll get the performance. And by performance, I mean attendance and inclusion and broad base, more people being active in sport longer for longer in life. That would might be a great way to go going forward.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm a big believer in stipends. I see right now in the school environment, we have such a high cost of living in many urban centers right now, and people are struggling to get by. And you've got teachers who, perhaps from a passion standpoint, would want to give back to sports that they participated in, but they feel like they financially can't do it, or there's not enough reward there, or they have other demands on their time. And I do believe if we incentivized that position, we would get better coaching. I think we would get more informed students. I think we would have long term health benefits in this country. I am 100% on board with what you're talking about right now. Do you see that same issue with schools?
I'm having a light bulb moment here right now, Scott, because I was actually thinking when I said about the tax incentives, I was thinking for families for signing their kids up, but I'm like, oh my gosh, definitely we should be creating opportunities where time spent coaching could be like, if someone signs up for coaching, there should be, the same sort of like a tax benefit for that time donated kind of thing, and that effort going to volunteers. Because I think there's something like that. If you look at the different communities, whether it's sport versus arts and culture versus all the different areas where people can volunteer, sport like outpaces all the different areas for where people volunteer their time. So yeah, of course I think it has to be a stipend, but that and rewarded, because we're asking people to also go and be certified in different safe sport programs, which requires people to spend a little time taking certification courses. I think parents should take these certification courses as well. But I think that's a great idea to be financially rewarding, if not rewarding, making whole the people who are trying to make our youth, children and youth more active.
Well, I know that there's no easy solution, but it does start with conversations like this. And I really want to thank you for your time in joining me here today. And as a Canadian, I want to thank you for your service as well, because you've
Yeah.
dedicated your career to service. And I know that there can be a lot of condescending conversations about government in this country and at times, and I'm sure you've heard them as well. But I know from watching you and through your action that you are about service. So thank you for that. And thank you for this today, Marnie.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for great conversation.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and you found some tangible takeaways that you can bring with you in your journey to becoming a better sports parent. The best way for you to support this podcast is for you to subscribe, follow, rate, review, and drop us a comment on whichever platform you're watching or listening. And the fastest way for us to grow this podcast and reach more parents out there is for you to share it with your respective networks and to tell people that you see at your youth sporting events when you're there with your children. Big thanks to Lightstock Music and Andre Diakonu for the music on this podcast, which is a production of Toolkit Content. Until next time, happy sports parenting. And remember, have fun out there. That's what it's supposed to be about.